I was at January 6th, and I looked at a bunch of like the Twitter at that point accounts for Christian leaders, and universally we were condemned. That was a moment in my life where I just thought, oh my goodness, how easily manipulated are we? Even conservatives. I mean, I remember, I think it was like Sean Hannity the next day on his show trying to balance this walk between the Democrats are the bad guys, but we need to condemn the crowd. And I thought, I'm part of that crowd. I was there. We were peaceful. And that goes for, I would say, 99% of the crowd. So there's different forms of slavery. And so, we got rid of chattel slavery. But now we're in a situation where you have a civil slavery. You have generational welfare that starts developing.
You will never own the land that you live on. That is fascinating to me. That you can't ever really outright own your house.
We're born into an environment where we're told a story about our past. We tend to take those at face value. Why shouldn't we? We trust our authorities in our lives. To challenge those things can be incredibly hard. Where I live in New York, if Trump didn't win, I'd be in a really bad spot because they passed a constitutional amendment that if you speak out against or you say anything negative about someone's immigration status or whether they had an abortion or not, or any of the LGBT stuff, you are breaking the law. And it's not just breaking the law, you are in violation of the very constitution of the state.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's podcast episode. I am over the moon excited. You might be able to tell by my overly jittery energy, but I am so excited to be sitting down and talking today to, I was going to say the one, the only, but that made me think about your whole joke about like Harris's against Harris, but this is John Harris. So hi, John. Welcome to the podcast. Nice to meet you too. Yeah. And sorry, I'll try not to talk over you. That's a bad habit of mine in real life. It's even harder on like the delayed internet feed. So
that's all right. Now there is another John Harris that stole the website I should have had, johnharris.com. He's a bodybuilder. So I've joked that that's actually me, but it's not.
Well, I am very excited to be talking to you. I mentioned to John before we got on the call that I have been watching his podcast now probably since, and you tell me because I'm not exactly sure when you started. I might have started watching you when you started, and we're going to actually dive right into that in the beginning, but around 2020, maybe a little bit before that is what my memory is telling me when I started watching you. Is that around the time that you started?
I started January 2019 with focusing on social justice, and that's really the genesis of the podcast. And it went mini viral, which I was shocked by. And then 2020 came. And of course, the content I put out on social justice was more in demand because not many Christians had been talking about it. So that's when the podcast really blossomed. And that might be when because I had a lot of subscribers in that time. Came on and started listening.
Yeah, 2019, 2020 is a little bit blurry for me. That's when I was pregnant with my first child. So it's a little fuzzy. Yeah. And then everybody 2020. So I'm really excited to be talking to John. I have found his voice, your voice, to be very much a voice of reason, if that's the way that we want to put it. A lot of your way with words, your way with encapsulating thoughts, I think is really great. And I've been, having a one-sided conversation with you now for 4 years. So this is really exciting. Now I will say, diving in, and it's funny because I've understood this more and more as time has gone on, because sometimes I would meet people over the years that would say like, oh my gosh, I love your content. And then I would like reference something and they're like, what do you and I realized, oh, it's not that they watch every single thing. It's maybe something has really hit them in a specific way. So they feel really connected. And so I do have to say, if I ask you a question today and you're like, girl, I did an episode on that, like 3 episodes or whatever, I am truly a fan. But just like everyone else, we don't see every single thing. Some of this I might be making you repeat yourself or re-explain something. Also, we potentially, most likely, have some different audiences. So I'm really excited to be introducing you to them because I really, like I said, I think you have some really great level-headed thoughts about the way that the culture has changed, especially within the Protestant church. So you kind of already touched on a little bit how you started. So, and I know this vaguely, but just kind of to back up a little bit, what brought you on to YouTube in the first place? And what is your background, like your educational background and all of that?
Sure.
Church background, anything you think is relevant.
Yeah. I grew up actually in a pastor's home. My dad's still a pastor of a non-denominational Bible church. So Christianity was always there. And I made a profession of faith when I was very young. I was 6 years old. And when I was in my teenage years, typically this is the story in most Baptist churches. There was a lot of struggling through different questions. And when I got to college, I really latched onto apologetics as a way to answer some of those. And I got involved in campus ministry, and I was doing a lot of evangelism at that time. And I already came from a family that was pretty politically active and very interested in history. So there was three things kind of at play, I think. I knew a little bit about history. I knew at least American history. I knew uh, my way around politics a little bit. And I also loved apologetics. And then when I was in seminary, which was in 2014, well, actually it was I started noticing it in 2014, but it was 2017 when I really saw the social justice stuff hitting hard. I knew what it was. And that was because of my background in secular university. I already had a history degree under my belt. And I was actually raised primarily in New York. So I was in a very hostile environment to Christianity. Not New York City. It was up the Hudson River, upstate more, but still very hostile, I would say, compared to regions of the South and the Midwest. And I was in North Carolina at the time at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, and I just could not believe that some of the things that Marxist professors had told me when I was in college were coming out of the mouth of seminary professors. And so I started pushing back on some of this, and I really thought it was unique to my situation. I didn't think that this had taken over the whole Southern Baptist Convention or the whole Christian evangelical world. But fast forward to 2020, and we realized that that's not the case. And so in 2019, I decided, after much prayer and counsel and trying to go through proper channels, that I was just going to let people know about my experience in seminary. At that time, I was actually in grad school at Liberty University getting a second master's in history there. And I decided to talk about my seminary experience, what had happened there, how they were pushing definitely a woke agenda. We can get into that more if you want. What happened was that went mini viral, and I had people from all over the Southern Baptist Convention messaging me saying, it's happening here, it's happening there, it's happening everywhere. Don't stop talking about it. I can't say, everyone said the same thing pretty much. I can't say anything about it because I'll lose my job, but you need to say something. And I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe how much of a problem this is. And of course, that put me in the crosshairs. I was a threat now, but the audience stuck by me, and I continued doing the podcast. 2020 came, and this blossomed into the social justice movement, that is, into affecting every organization that I know of just about on any major level in Christianity. So I was constantly, every week, it was like, here's another organization that's compromising, and here's what you can do about it, or here's why it's wrong. And so I was explaining the issue. I wrote 2 books on the subject. And I actually even changed my whole thesis topic. I was going to research the Dutch and their reaction to the Puritans. And that's a fascinating topic, because like stories like the Legend of Sleepy Hollow are actually about that, with Ichabod Crane being this Puritan school teacher who comes in, and the Dutch kind of reject him, and they mess with him. And I thought, well, I grew up in this area. I really want to look at that. And I decided to study something I really wasn't that interested in, but I thought it was important, which was the social justice movement, and specifically what happened in the 1960s and 70s and 80s a little bit, but in evangelical circles, because that's really the genesis of this whole thing. It lay dormant for a couple decades because of the religious right and how it overshadowed that movement. And it was very much a populist uprising. But in academic circles, the social justice movement kept chugging on, and then it reemerged, I'd say, in the 2010s. So we're living now kind of post, hopefully, the worst of it in evangelicalism, I'm hoping, at least for.
I like hearing that.
For the, well, in some ways it's worse. In some ways it's people taking their feet off the gas pedal. But I think 2020 was, there was some major pushback. There was a lot of people in these organizations that said, I don't want anything to do with that. I didn't think I was funding an organization that was pushing that. I thought I was funding evangelism or the gospel. And so organizations have had to be very careful now. I still see it happening, but I think they've changed the language, and they're not emphasizing it as much. And I can give some examples of that. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I guess I don't know if there's anything else you want to explore there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like what you said about 2020, like it was such a crossroads. I don't know. It was a peak of, it changed so many people's positions on so many things. I think that the extremeness of it being in all of our faces it woke everyone up. So, I mean, I see the same thing you see. I think language is changing. I think it's becoming more subversive, if that's the word, or like low key. But once again, that's one of the things I really appreciate about your work. I was just watching one of your videos when I was getting ready, and you do have an ability to notice how the language shifts and how they're changing it, but maybe meaning the same thing. And yeah, I just think that what I don't know what the word is, the crossroads of all your past, your upbringing gives you an ability to do that. And that's all really interesting. So history. So you got a degree in history as well as going to seminary, right?
I have two. Yeah, I have a bachelor's in history with an Americanist. You're either, well, it depends what college or grad school you go to. You're either an Americanist generally or a Europeanist, I guess. But I was an Americanist in both, so in undergrad and in grad school. So
You,
my focus,
sorry, go on. You were about to answer my question.
yeah, my focus being American social justice for my thesis in grad
Mhm.
school, American social justice. Uh, I get teachers, leaders. That means that I know more about American history. That's just how they frame it. But
Mhm, mhm.
yeah, I did take some European history courses and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah, so your focus was more American history than
mhm.
European history. So I have been on a protein journey for the last couple of years. I have really specifically focused on increasing my protein as I have been trying to increase my muscle mass. Now, obviously, I am lifting weights. I really am doing physical therapy, but in that physical therapy, I'm using weights, I'm using body weight, and I have had the goal ever since my last serious knee injury a couple of years ago to really develop and build muscle. Now, that is or has been, I don't want to speak negatively over myself, that has historically been very difficult for me to build muscle. And so I've really been trying to tweak all of the pieces in my routine to optimize my body to be able to do that, to build muscle. And one of those pieces for me, like I said, has been increasing my protein. Now, some days it's hard to get in as much protein as I would like to get in. And so I went on the hunt for a good quality protein powder. And in the process, I remembered, because it had been years since I used any protein powder, that most protein powders hurt my stomach. I end up feeling bloated. I have like sharp pains. My digestion is kind of funky. And then I found Equip protein. Now, Equip is amazing because the ingredients are super simple. I don't do well on like a whey protein or a casein protein isolate or pea protein powder now at this point. I know that's totally different, but I don't do well on those protein powders. Like I said, I have side effects, including like severe breakouts that I will get from some of those ingredients. And with Equip, I have none of that. It is complete ease of digestion. Like I said, it's a very simple protein powder. The main protein source is literally just dried beef. You can do the unflavored protein powder from them, which I have a few friends that do that, and they just put fruit in and like a sweetener of their choice, maple syrup, honey, milk, something like that. I know milk's not a sweetener, but when they're building their smoothie. Or I like to pick one of their flavored protein powders. They are sweetened with stevia, so some people don't like stevia. I like it. I think it tastes amazing, like the different flavors that they have. I love doing their chocolate mixed with their peanut butter. So I do like a scoop almost of both. So I'm getting extra protein, and I love that chocolatey peanut butter flavor. I mix it in with some raw milk and some ice. It's absolutely delicious, and it is an easy, pain-free way, nutritious way to up my protein throughout the day without any difficulty. So I love Equip. I'm very grateful for them. If you want to check them out, you can use my code NikkiP for 15% off. Thank you in advance if you do use my code, as always, and let's hop back into the interview. Okay, so this is one of the first things I wanted to touch on with you is, I don't know if the word is historicity or like how history is even really determined. Because one thing I've noticed through your videos, through other people's videos, through living it in real time, I mean, we've seen this even once again with COVID, with everything that's unfolded in the last few years, is there does seem to be a battle for what even ends up being deemed as actual like history. Like this is what happened. Honestly, as time has gone on, it's made me feel more like history in some ways is like gossip. Like, oh, this person said this, they meant it this way. And it's made me, I mean, kind of a theme, sadly enough, in a lot of my interviews has been that I have become a little bit jaded. That's almost, we're going to touch on that in regards to politics, in regards to what I actually even believe is even real, like how much is even real. Oh no, am I frozen again? There I am. Okay, I don't want to freeze. But I guess what I want to ask you, and I don't, you tell me if this question even makes any sense, but how is history like determined, or how does a narrative take root? Is it just all through the universities? Is there like how does a narrative even take place? Does that question even make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Historiography is the word you're looking,
Historiography.
and that's the study of history and how it's interpreted and remembered.
Mm,
Some universities now have memory studies. I don't know if they're a whole department's dedicated, but they'll have courses on this and stuff. And I think most of that is a postmodern bent, but they look at history as much more plastic, and it's something that we can change. We can determine depending on the era we're in, and
mm,
this is a lot of this has to do with minority groups that have been underrepresented,
mm,
or at least they say they're underrepresented,
mm,
needing to tell their side of the story. Oftentimes, I've noticed, though, it's not those groups and their stories that are the things remembered. It's what like modern, more Marxist leaning professors say they
mm.
should be remembering.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but anyway, yeah, I think how does a narrative form? I mean, it's like anything else in life, to be quite honest. And I hate to say, I mean, academics is supposed to be objective, but there's a lot of style and fashion that goes on, and certain figures who are popular, and the cool kids table, if you want to put it that way.
Mhm.
What they say it is going to be what people tend to try to copy, and there's a lot of incentive for doing that because uh, especially today, if you take the wrong view on a controversial subject in the
Mhm.
past, then you won't have a job. So if you take a popular view and you even further reinforce it with your own studies, which is what I think over 90% of historians probably do, then you have an opportunity to advance yourself in your career. So I think a lot of it does
Mhm.
have to do with that. We're also, we're born into an environment where we're told a story about our past, or
Mhm.
multiple stories, and we tend to take those at face value. Why shouldn't we? Right? Um, we trust our authorities in our lives. And so to challenge those things can be incredibly hard too. So
Mm.
history tends to move in that direction until one person challenges it who is popular enough, and then everyone else falls in line
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, totally.
changes a little bit.
So would you say it kind of sounds like you're saying it's similar to like, geez, so many things now, like medicine, like there's just
Yeah.
money in a lot of these things in the universities and the government, and like they're all kind of holding hands.
Yeah, so fashion, optics, popularity, and it's not just money. I think it's also wanting to be thought of well by people,
Mm, mm,
wanting academic accolades. And I've noticed that in my own experience, this doesn't mean everyone's like this in academia, but most people with academic degrees who are teaching, at least, I think, tend to be very insecure. They're very, I mean, you've heard of like the quirky
mm.
professor stereotype. That's real.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
a lot of the time, these guys are in ivory towers. They're not connected to real life all that much. They're more comfortable with their books than they are
yeah.
real living people sometimes. And it's not everyone, but
Yeah,
they
yeah.
they can tend to be very arrogant, and
Mm,
that's their field. Their narrow interest has become their expertise, and that's what they have to show for life. And so if you take it away from them, you say, well, you're wrong about what you've been dedicating your life to. What do they have? They're not going to just go get a job necessarily or start a business or something like that. So they're very loyal to, or they're not likely to change their view. They're going to keep what they've been doing and try to preserve it, try to maintain it.
yeah, I remember, I don't know if it was maybe a year or two ago, you did an interview with a historian who had some kind of divergent opinion on one of the founding fathers. And maybe this will ring a bell as I'm saying it. If not, I know you do a ton of episodes and then we just move along. But he had a plantation. And essentially, because his view was divergent, his books ended up being taken out. He was like on the board or something like that. And they're like, no, sorry, you're out of here.
Hmm.
And the whole plantation basically had to stick to this one view of how this founding father was. And because this guy didn't agree, he was completely
Okay,
ousted.
it may be Mark Halachak, who
Maybe.
I did some work with him on Thomas Jefferson.
That was who I was going to say, but I didn't want to sound dumb and guess wrong, but that's who
Yeah,
I was going to say. So
so
yes.
he very much he's very accomplished in that, in the field of Jefferson studies. He's written a number of books on the subject.
Mm,
He actually immerses himself in the primary sources, which this obviously becomes a very important thing in historiography. What do the primary sources say versus how secondary sources interpret them? So he's very, well studied in Jefferson, and he doesn't think that Jefferson actually had a relationship with Sally Hemings.
That's
And
right. Okay.
very new, innovative story that we tell ourselves in order to try to take Jefferson down a notch and discredit him. And so Mark, basically has been. I think he's has a. I don't know how it's framed legally, but he's not allowed to go to Monticello.
He's not allowed to go there?
Yeah, he can't go on the grounds.
Wow.
He's because I think he started. I don't know. I wasn't there for the situation, but I think he started maybe arguing with one of the tour guides. I don't know.
You are not allowed here anymore.
I don't know if he
That's
was being belligerent
funny.
or anything like that. Maybe just people looked him up, but yeah, he's somewhat persona non grata, and very few places he can speak about his research in these areas, which is kind of sad because there are so many Jefferson scholars who are far less accomplished than him, who
Mm.
have more prestigious positions at universities, and he'll never have a hope of any of that. So, I don't know how. I don't think he regrets it, but there's a lot of people in that situation, and I've just, from personal experience, learned to realize that sometimes reenactors and historians who are, they call them popular historians or
Mm.
just self-taught historians, can sometimes know their subject matter better if they're
Mm.
really steeped in the primary sources than even the academics, because the academics constantly have a pressure to conform to whatever the prevailing narrative is.
Yeah, totally. It's like a fresh set of eyes versus having all of the outside input telling you how to see the information you're taking in. That makes
Yeah.
sense to me. Okay, what does persona non grata mean?
Oh, meaning he's, not welcome. If he shows up, he's the kind of guy at the party that people are going to ignore and pretend's not there. He's just in the corner.
Okay.
I shouldn't have used that word.
No, 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 it's good. I just asked for clarification. I just didn't know. Um, okay. Do I go to this point? My brain's going 32 different directions, but I think I will. All right. So I might be reading into things here a little bit when I ask you this question, but speaking of history, like I said, I feel like the last few years have definitely instilled in me, and I can see, this has happened amongst a lot of people, a just general sense of distrust, um, about narratives in general that are happening real time, but also in the past. And as a viewer, and like I said, I could be totally reading this wrong or even maybe projecting on you. But I felt like when everything was unfolding with January 6th, like you as a commentator or a creator, I felt like what you were seeing, like maybe changed your way of thinking about things or shook you up, like all the stuff with what's his name, Ray, whatever, the guy who like they never found out who this guy was. The fact that it seemed like the police were letting people in, like just all of these things that unfolded on January 6th. I felt like watching you, it was like, oh man, he's either had like a worldview shift or like a I can't even believe this is happening kind of moment.
Yeah.
um I don't know, what were your thoughts and feelings in general about, speaking of a historical event, but about January 6th? Is that too broad of a question?
No, but it might be the kind of thing that YouTube doesn't like you asking. So I
It
don't
might
know.
be, this might be cut out, we'll find out.
I was there. I was at January 6th.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, I had tear
Oh.
gas like right near me, and I smelled it and stuff. So I think that's probably what you're referring to. I was very concerned about that election. Had attended a number of Stop the Steal rallies. I was
Mhm.
trying my best to get other people involved, and I thought if we don't have elections, that's our last mechanism.
Uh-huh.
We don't really have any other influential uh, institution on our side.
Mm.
Elections are the only mechanism we have at this point to do much in the socio-political sphere, at least on a broad level.
Mm.
So I ended up attending. My poor wife, that's her birthday, is January 6th, and I
Oh.
well, we'll just attend this rally and then we'll go see some
Yeah,
sights to see,
no big
right?
deal.
Yeah, right. And we got there, and I think there was about 1 million people
Oh
there.
my
It was
gosh.
huge. I think it was very much underreported how many people were actually there. But we ended up
Wow.
when Trump finished his speech, we started walking towards the Capitol, and our phones had not worked up to that point. And as we're walking, we're passing, what was it? The Homeland Security building, I think it
Mm,
was.
mm.
And they're flipping us off from the windows. And I've never seen anyone capture an image of this, or I think it was very quick and then they stopped doing it. They were just laughing at us after that.
Wow.
But it made the crowd angry and they started chanting, "Do your job." And they had this guy come out and face down the crowd. It was all provocative. And he could see him smiling sort of beneath his mask, this, and just smirking at them. And it was it was kind of surreal. I couldn't believe that was happening. All of a sudden, I get a phone call from my brother. I couldn't believe the phones all of a sudden worked.
Wow.
And he says, Mike Pence just said he's not going, he's going to certify the election. And all of a sudden, the crowd, everyone knows it. And then the phone stopped working. So it's like for that
Whoa.
little detail, when Mike Pence made that announcement, everyone knows what's going on. And then the phone stopped working again. So we
Wow.
make our way to the Capitol. As we're going, I see a line of police cars, I think it was about a street or two over, um, and they're just sitting there. And the Capitol is unguarded. All the barriers that are normally up are down, and there's all these MAGA trucks there. And I walk into the grounds. That's the only place there's porta potties because there was a huge crowd, and the mayor had shut down all the restaurants and things. So there's nowhere to go to the bathroom.
Mm.
So the only place is in the grounds of the Capitol. There's a bunch of things that have not been reported, even on conservative media, that I feel like I need to say. But
Wow.
that's part of the reason people wanted to go over there. It's like there's a
Was
whole
just to use the bathroom.
my middle-aged father being one of those people.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So you can't really hold it when you get to a certain age that well. And you're like, man, there's like 6 or 8 or however many porta johns.
I can't
And
even hold it after a certain point, but go on.
right, right. And there was a big line. There was a line of people waiting to
Wow.
use these porta potties. So I walk into that area. Well, not quite to that area, but I'm in the grounds, and I ask a lady there. I said, "Are we supposed to be here?" And she said, "Yeah, there was some old ladies who needed to go to the restroom, and the guards, whoever was there, they took down these little ribbons, and that's all you saw as evidence was these little bitty yellow ribbons on the ground." And she said, "Oh, they took them down and said go use." And it made sense to me. I thought, "Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. People need to use the restroom."
Wow. Wow.
No one's doing anything at this point. There's no one climbing walls. No one's going into the Capitol, at least from where I was. Maybe on the other side that was happening, but
Mm.
all of a sudden, tear gas and flashbangs. And it was not far from where I was. I could smell it. And it was deployed on a crowd of people who weren't doing anything. And all of a sudden I saw that crowd turn. People who were just standing
Yeah.
there having a good time.
Whoa.
They start climbing the walls. They start going in. Trying to go into the Capitol. And there's only like 3 guards. There's no way to stop the mass. And they can't even cover every area of entry. So I mean, we stayed there for, I don't know, an hour, hour and a half. I mean, I'm sure the government has my cell phone data, knows exactly how long I was there.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, the mayor of DC puts out a stay-at-home order, basically leave the Capitol area, and everyone gets this text at the same time. Cell phones work again. And
Wow.
it's like, what? Did they just turn a button on? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we end up leaving at that point, and there were guys in the crowd. Since then, I know there's been some work done as far as like people that are suspected of being government agents who are there with microphones saying "stay," and some people were ignoring them. Some people were like, "Why? Yeah, maybe I will." But I literally walked into the shaman that day, like on my way
Oh.
into the event. I literally walked in. I bumped him, and I turned
Wow.
around and looked at his hat, and I told my wife, I said, "That's a really cool hat." And she, and then later that night, I get home. I didn't even know what happened inside the Capitol. I had no
Wow.
I just knew that I saw people going that direction, but I turned on the news. I couldn't even believe where that shaman guy had gotten to. And then I got, and this is the surreal thing, I think. So I'm sorry, that was a long way to set this up, but
No,
getting
this
back to
is
your
this is good.
question, I looked at online, and I looked at a bunch of like the Twitter at that point accounts for Christian leaders
Hmm.
in the Southern Baptist Convention too, people like Al Mohler and J.D. Greear and others. And universally, we were condemned. I was condemned for being part of the crowd,
Hmm.
and that, I think, that was a moment in my life where I just thought, oh my goodness, how easily manipulated are we?
That
Uh,
that.
yeah. And even conservatives. I mean, I remember, I think it was like Sean Hannity the next day on his show trying to balance this walk between the Democrats are the bad guys, but we need to condemn the crowd.
Hmm.
And I thought, I'm part of that crowd. I was there. My
Yeah.
wife was there. She wasn't doing anything. My father was there. My father-in-law was there. And we were peaceful. There was no ill intention. And that goes for, I would say, 99% of the crowd. And most of us did not know even what my dad, afterward, he was farther back. He had no clue anyone went into the Capitol. He just saw smoke and from the you know, gas they deployed, poorly deployed.
Yeah, yeah.
And he had no clue till he got home and turned on the television what had happened inside. And of course, they only took selections of that. And I knew immediately this is manipulated, this is a trap, and I see everyone falling for it. So it was surreal in that sense.
Yeah, it's my mom has been brought up now in multiple interviews I've done because she kind of would it was more scolding in the past. She's kind of lightened up now because I think she's like, "Oh, I see what you mean." But I referenced feeling just jaded about, the media, news events, politics in general. But a big part of that is because of what you just said. Like even when things pop up in the news that maybe I might feel like, oh, like in arms about or frustrated, I feel hesitant to say anything or even really react in any kind of way because I don't trust what's being fed to me right away. I feel like it is so easy with the right, I mean, and this is just right camera work as is, the right shots edited the right way with the right music, the right lines, whatever, to look a certain way, not to mention, I mean, we don't know how they're employing, oh no, I'm frozen again. You got this camera. There we go. Not to mention stuff like AI, special effects. Like we have no clue what's being, done to manipulate the media that we're seeing. Yeah, that's really, really disappointing. But I did feel that as a viewer, like you had seen something and experienced something that made you be like, wow, I don't know, I'm really disappointed. I don't trust any of this anymore. And even in regards to elections, I mean, I voted this last time around, but I kept joking that I was like I'm a reluctant Trump voter. I was a reluctant Trump voter because I don't know that I really believe that our vote even matters, honestly, but I wasn't about to not vote because that could be just like my mom joked, like jaded Nikki in the age of the internet. Like, no, your vote matters, vote. And if I had to vote, I was going to vote for him, but I was one of those people that like I read his Art of the Deal book back when he ran the first time in 2016. So when they started throwing stuff at him, I was like, this was all already very evident in his own book. Like he talks this way about women. Like this is kind of how he is. But
Does
if
he in
we
his book? I haven't read that book.
yes, it's totally like
Really?
you read it and you're like, oh gosh, like he says some very cringeworthy, disgusting things, in my opinion, about women. Now, granted, it is the past. There's room, obviously, for people to change and grow and, say things that maybe they're like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. But B, I've heard you say this before too. It's like we weren't voting for our next pastor. Like we had basically two choices. And if our vote matters, I was going to be voting for the person that was hopefully going to preserve the right for future elections, if elections are even real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, you looked like you were going to say something.
No, I could though. I mean, I was in a similar boat in 2016. I actually did not vote for him, and I didn't really matter because I was in New York. I thought, and he's not going to win that state anyway. But
Yeah.
I was a big Cruz guy. I had
Oh,
volunteered
okay.
Cruz campaign, and the way he treated Cruz's wife, and I didn't think that he was a conservative at all. So I just thought I'm not voting for him. I'd rather see the Republican Party purified over the next 4 years and come up with a better candidate.
Mm.
And I think I was maybe somewhat naive because I don't know that we even had 4 years. I really thought,
Oof.
well, they'll do some damage to the country, but I really don't want to see the Republican Party compromised. And I think over 2020, especially for many of us, I think changed our whole outlook. And I
Mm.
became much more pro Trump after that whole thing because I
Mm.
realized who his enemies were, how much they hated him, what they were willing to do, and how evil they were. And I thought, well, if that's who hates him, then there must be something that he's doing to foil their plans. And that's what
Yeah.
I want to do is foil their plans. And if that's what they're afraid of, then it doesn't mean I have to endorse every single thing he's done or said
Totally.
morally on a personal level. But I thought he governed much better than I anticipated he would. And then,
Mm.
uh, seeing what happened in 2020 made me even more supportive. I'm surprised, to be quite honest with you, that he was able to win the election last time. I was very skeptical that this would even matter. And he must have just, he must, in my opinion, this is obviously just John's opinion, but
Yeah, yeah.
he must have had so much more support than we even realized. Because I'm sure they pulled out all the stops they could have to rig the vote and all of that. And they didn't have the advantage of COVID and the mail-in ballots. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that maybe that was one of the tricks up their sleeves they couldn't use. But but yeah, I mean, we got 4 years to try to capitalize on this, make some gains, and for Christians in particular to in their local communities, you got 4 years that you're not going to be threatened as far
There
as
it is. Yeah.
preaching the gospel, doing whatever you
Hmm.
need to do, holding biblical stands on sexuality, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where I live in New York, if Trump didn't win, I'd be in a really bad spot because they passed a constitutional amendment that if you speak out against or you say anything negative about someone's immigration status or whether they had an abortion or not, or any of the LGBT stuff, you are
Whoa.
breaking the law. And it's not just breaking the law, you are in violation of the very constitution of the state. They just passed that by a referendum or whatever, not a referendum, a ballot initiative in 2023 or 2024, the last election. So,
Wow, they
so
are
yeah,
just slipping and sliding in those
yeah,
anti-free speech laws all across the US, it seems.
yeah, yeah. And I think
Wow.
they can't do much with Trump in office and the Supreme Court being the way it is, but it's sitting there, it's waiting. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
does it make me
Yeah.
very confident about the future if those barriers don't hold?
No, I know. You just hit on the head all the reasons, I mean, really that I voted for him and the reasons why I was excited that he won. Oh, I don't know if this is going to be annoying for me to say or if it's really pointless if I'll say it and then we're just like, great, next topic. But what made me a little nervous is like you said, there is the thought of like he won because there was so much support for him, which is, exciting if enough people were like, awakened by the last few years, or were woke over the last few years and now they get it. That's a possibility, and that's the possibility that I'm hoping. But there is a part of me that was so black pilled, if that's the word, over Operation Warp Speed and the damage that oh no, I'm frozen again. Come on. I mean, there's no such thing too as a frozen face that's a good frozen face. Just there we go. Anyways, as I was saying, I was very black pilled by Operation Warp Speed. And I continue to be black pilled by it because it's not like Trump turned around and was like, oh man, like I didn't know, and a president can't be an expert on everything. You keep experts close, but things pan out. I don't know, whatever. There's a lot, and there's a lot more I could go off into that in regards to the jab that makes me feel very less hopeful about the situation and a little bit more like, was he allowed to win? Like back to that whole original thought of like, is everything just picked for us? Is democracy, is voting even a legit thing? Or is this all kind of staged in a way to continue to move the story forward, how the elites, if that's the word we want to use, want the story to move forward, the globalists or the whatever, one world, people that are in fan of a one world type government. I don't know. And I don't even know if there's a point for me to say that. That's just where this is like an ongoing conversation between me and my parents. They are like so stoked that Trump won. And I don't want you to get it twisted. I'm stoked too, especially considering the alternative. But there's a lot to that issue alone that does make me nervous for the next couple of years. But like I said, everything you said about why you're glad that he won and how it's hopefully his presence is going to stave off the extreme stomping down of speech is a big reason why I'm excited that he's in as well.
Yeah, I think the fact that he appointed RFK to the head of the Department of
Yes.
Human Services is his way of letting us know that he made a mistake and that he is going to back off some of these things. I mean, he's not a medical guy, and I think he was in a tough spot. Like he had the medical experts of the country telling him he needed to do this, and you could tell because I watched a lot of his press conferences that he was even in the press conferences jumping out ahead of them and saying, "Well, we're going to open up soon." And
Yes, I do remember that. Yes.
Fauci would then, well,
No.
it's yeah. Trump has a great idea, but actually, the experts need to determine some things first, and then we'd be locked down for longer. So I think his instincts, he should have trusted them, and I think he didn't, and it came back to bite him. But I know there's pro-life people upset about RFK being in this position, but if you look at the big picture, I think that was his way of trying to let everyone know that on that issue, he's
Yes.
changing his mind.
Yes, I was just going to say that minus RFK's radical, or at least has vocally been radical about abortion and stuff like that. He was the biggest, if we're going to use that word again, like white pill for me in regards to like, oh, okay, what's going on here with Trump? Because I've been lightly following RFK's work for a few years now, and his, work that he's done with Del Bigtree, and the way it's amazing though, how even though he is essentially like a left-leaning politician, how they were not calling him crazy the way that they're calling him crazy now that he's linked arms with Trump. But I'm very hopeful, like you said, because of him and the work that he's done in the space, that we're going to see some movement in a positive direction in regards to all the public health stuff.
Yeah, he's promised, or at least he's said, I should say, that he's going to reinstate some of the anti-abortion policies
Yeah.
that Trump had in the first administration. So I'm not sold on the idea that he's just going to implement a pro-choice or a pro-abortion agenda, which some
Yeah.
people think.
Yeah, I'm not either. So I have cut most supplements out of my life. I'm not saying that I won't be taking more supplements in the future, but right now, for where I'm at in my life, I'm really not taking that many. But one supplement that has come in clutch for me so many times, I use it pretty much every single day, is magnesium. Now, I don't just use any magnesium. I've also talked about this before, but I use the Bioptimizer's magnesium. And the reason why I love it so much is because there are 7 different types of magnesium in this one magnesium pill. And the reason that that is so awesome is because the body uses different types of magnesium for different things. So sometimes if you're taking a magnesium supplement that only has one type of magnesium, it may not be able to help you with the other things that magnesium typically can help with if you were using the right type. So by having 7 different kinds, you are expanding your body's capabilities to use the magnesium in different ways to help your body. So for me, in my last pregnancy, you guys know I was really sick. That really stunk, and magnesium was not the answer for that. But magnesium for me was the answer for restless leg syndrome. I struggled with that in my first pregnancy, and I was not taking the Bioptimizer's magnesium, and it was really hard to keep under control. It was almost a little excruciating and like kind of drove me crazy. But in my last pregnancy, as long as I stayed up regularly on taking my Bioptimizer's magnesium, I had 0 restless leg syndrome. And sometimes I would forget to take it and I would start to feel it. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I haven't taken my magnesium. I would go and take it. And within like minutes, my legs would relax, which is like an answer to prayers. You know this if you've struggled with that. Magnesium is great for so many different things in the body, like I said, and I just highly recommend them. Side note, it's not like a kid's product, but we use a miniature scoop, like a 1/4 of the regular serving at night for Logan sometimes. They're a sleep breakthrough product, and Logan loves it. It helps him have a deep, restful sleep. I think he legitimately has noticed a difference. He also really likes the taste because he asks for it at night. So I just love their products. Bioptimizers tests their products extensively, so they're very like science and research backed. I think you're going to love their products as much as I have. So back into the interview. Okay, so on that note, kind of, I guess since we're on the political side of things, we talked a little bit before we hit record about titles, right? He was like, "Are you a trad wife?" He doesn't know who I am. We were talking about. We were
Maybe you can
talking.
explain to me what that is.
I can explain. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't even know, honestly.
Oh, okay.
And that's kind of what leads into this question. It's like in my head, I've been saying, now this really is a side note to the actual question that I'm going to get into. But in my head, a trad wife has just been a wife that's married and, you know, sees her husband as the head of the household and I don't know, like isn't a full-time boss babe out of the home all the time. Like, I don't know, but the term has just been like taken to so many different places that I don't even know what it means anymore. I guess I consider myself that, like I said, in the sense that I'm like, I don't know, man, like I'm 17 years deep into my marriage that I don't know. But along those lines, and he kind of agreed with me that like these titles are very flexible because it's not like this is like a dictionary definition that we've all like looked at each other and agreed upon. But the term Christian nationalism, ooh, it's like the boogeyman term. And it really bothers me because on like face value, what I think Christian nationalism is, I think I'm a Christian nationalist. But then like I'll see people, I mean, yes, the mainstream media completely demonize it, do entire hit pieces on Christian nationalism. The funny thing is, by the end, I'm still confused as to what they mean by Christian. I'm like, what do you think this means? That we're going to like go inflict violence on people to like walk out our beliefs in the public square? I'm curious as to what you think Christian nationalism means. Because yeah, to me, I guess I think a Christian nationalist is someone who thinks that they should be voting with their Christian ethics and living their day-to-day life with their Christian ethics. But even saying that feels weird because in my worldview, everyone is living their life from their ethical standpoint.
Yep.
So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I think that this is an old term actually that has been used in the past, but it was used of something completely different. So, in the turn of the century, if you were called a little after that, I guess, but like 1910s, that era, if you
Mm.
were called a Christian nationalist, then you were someone who actually believed in a form of socialism. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
it was a left leaning term at that point. Yeah, there was these things
Interesting.
called the Bellamy clubs that popped up all over. There's hundreds of them in the country, and
Huh.
they used the term Christian nationalist to describe what they believed, and it was a Fabian socialism. So it wasn't like a radical revolution. We're going to get there slowly, and they thought, well, that's Christian, right? Christianity says you should take care of the
Mm.
people who are in need and poor and need health care, and so we're going to do all this socialist stuff to make sure that happens. And
Mm.
but obviously, the term doesn't mean that now. I think the media picked it up and started using it as a boogeyman, and part of it is because I think they've been discredited somewhat from using the term white nationalist. I think that's what they want to say.
That
But
totally.
yeah, then that's what they've been saying for a while. But I think they've overplayed that. And
Mm.
uh, there's too many people in Trump's coalition who aren't white also. So it was easy for conservatives to choose someone in the coalition who wasn't to be a
Mm.
spokesperson or to represent them. So I think that it was because of the failure of using that term that they've turned to, well, this is also scary. This is the same kind of thing. They kept the nationalism term, which is supposed to be scary because it sounds like, the Nazis. They were
Yeah,
nationalists.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And so white nationalism, Christian nationalism, but they can then have a broader, it's more, I guess, easy to point out Christian influence in actual halls of power in the United States than it is to point out KKK or Nazi influence. So they have that going for them. Like, hey,
Yeah,
there are
yeah.
actually Christians involved in these things.
Yeah.
So it's really started, I think, in the lead up to 2020. It wasn't used very much. I think
Mm.
there was one of the Stop the Steal rallies where Michael Flynn was there right before January 6th. This was in December, I believe. There was, I think it was CNN used, there was a journalist there who wrote a piece and used the term.
Mm.
And don't quote me on whether it was CNN. It was one of the mainstream media publications. And I remember that being one of the first times I think I ever talked about it on the program because it hadn't really been used all that much. After January 6th, that's all we heard about. And
Totally.
that's, I think, the event they wanted to use to define Christian nationalism. So it's not even so much a clinical definition as it is an image. So you hear the word Christian nationalism, what image
Mm.
comes up? A guy with buffalo horns and his shirt off in the uh,
Yes.
Capitol building. That's what Christian
Yes.
nationalism is. It's people fighting guards. It's it breaking down barriers in the Capitol. That's what it is. So I think that there's a lot of emotion being pumped into this term, and they're trying to make it carry that. But there are some guys in Christian circles who have taken the term and said, you know what, I'm going to appropriate this for myself. I'm
Hmm.
fine calling myself a Christian nationalist. I'm not one of those people, but I understand the idea there. It's just like the term Christian that was used as a smear, and the Christian
Oh,
just said,
that's
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah, we're little Christs. Okay,
Yeah,
that's what it means.
yeah.
So I think it's something similar. It's like, yeah, I believe the nation should be Christian. And so there were some books like Andrew Isker and Andrew Torba wrote a book on it. Stephen Wolfe wrote a book on it. I don't
Hmm.
even know who else has written stuff. I'm sure there's been more now. I know that Margie Taylor Greene has, I think, called herself that.
Mm.
I'm trying to think who else. There's been a few popular figures who have used the term in a positive way. But I think what they mean by it is that, and this is beyond like Christian values or bringing your ethics to politics. It is that, but I think it's beyond that. I think what they mean by it, and I think this dovetails with what the media also means by it, is that the United States should have a Christian identity or a Christian character. So it's not just that Christian values are represented in the United States, is that we see ourselves as a Christian country.
Yeah.
Just like you would see a home as a Christian home where there's two parents who are Christians, even if not all the kids are, or a Christian bookstore, Christian music, Christian conference. I mean, we use this term a lot to
Hmm.
describe things that don't always contain 100%, rate of conversion. There could be people who aren't Christians, but they're accepting the social standards of Christianity in that space, in that organization. And so people who are Christian nationalists, I guess, say the United States should be like this. It should also conceive of itself as Christian. And so it's okay, if that's true, to have prayers. We already do, but to continue doing that, to have Christians do invocations, to have In God We Trust, to have Christian displays, to hear church bells. And it's fine if you want to have an ordinance against the Muslim call to prayer, because we're a Christian, and that gets into a discussion, I guess, over what cultural Christianity is and whether it's good or bad. And there's Christians who think that's a terrible thing. But I think Christian nationalists are very open to that. And they want to see Christian moral standards publicly the default setting in communities. And
wow. Dude, this is what I mean though. You do such a good job at even like representing the quote other side, if that's how we want to say it, because you just kind of clarified some stuff for me that makes sense based on the stuff that I've seen. So like I remember, you're right, it had to be like 6 years ago because I was still living in Nashville at that point, watching CBS do a hit piece on Christian nationalists. And everything you just said is totally, thinking back on it, like, yes, that's what they were trying to say. And that, I think, is what they mean when they say Christian nationalism in like a slanderous way, that that people believe that the nation should have a standpoint of being Christian. But I guess, wouldn't it only be that way if Christians were in office? So then that's where my brain goes, well, we're not going to storm the Capitol literally and like take over everything. And then just like, we have to be voted into place. We have to actually, and then that's where it goes back to, so then what is so wrong about a Christian stepping out? And yeah, go on. Sorry.
You're 100% right. In order for this to so I guess the good way to look at it is like, it's like a garment that's been torn and some of the strands are still there and they're connected to the main garment or something, but some of them have been severed. And that's kind of where we are with our Christian past, where we still have some of these archaic traditions that we observe that are Christian, but we've also are in the process of severing all those remaining connections, and we've already severed some of them. So like prayer in school is one of the big ones brought up, that we've severed our connection to the past. That used to be across the board. We could pray in school and it was expected. And now it's only done in certain, Christian schools, or I do happen to know there are some public schools that still do forms of it, but they're very careful in how they do it. And they're in very Bible Belt areas. So
yes, I know of one in Idaho.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah,
wow. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're running the risk when they do those kinds of things. Don't tell anyone what the name of the school is. But
yeah, I know. I realized I was like, was that even too much? But go on.
Yeah. But anyway, there's a story I just thought of, but it would take too long. But
you can tell it. Feel free, unless you really don't want to.
Well, I was in traffic court because I had violated the law. This was more than a decade ago, at least. So I had sped on a certain road called the Taconic State Parkway with a lot of people. They speed on that road. And I guess I didn't realize I was going fast. I was pulled over. I go to traffic court, and I was shocked because in New York, you don't see this much, but the judge opens the whole court, the proceedings with prayer to Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Jesus Christ, amen. And I was like blown away. I was like, I'll just give you all my money. Like, I don't care. I don't think he even did. I think, we worked something out, but anyway, I don't remember how it ended up, but I was blown away. And I asked him about it though. After I asked the judge, he said, aren't you risking a lawsuit with the ACLU when you do this? And he kind of shrugged and he's like, look, this is the way it's been. If I'm the last one to do it, I'll be the last one to do it. But this is how, when I first started out, this was how people did it. And he was an older guy. I think he's probably retired or dead by now. He was much older. So all that to say, I mean, that's another example of something that we used to be common, that was Christian, that now you're not supposed to do. And you look around you and feel weird if you do it.
Yeah.
And I think the Christian nationalists are saying, like, we should revive some of these things. We should reconnect ourselves to the old garment. We should reinforce the strands that we still have that are still connected to that old garment. We shouldn't sever them. And the concern that secular liberals have is they think that means, well, what about the Buddhists, the Muslims, the atheists who don't have the same privileges? They don't have access to these things. Like, if you're going to put up a manger scene or a Christmas tree, you got to put all their stuff too on a public setting. You can't just have Christianity being the default or the privileged religion here. You must have all these other groups having equal access. And if they don't, have equal access, then there's no religion, which obviously we both know is a farce. You can't really
Mm.
have your values come from your
Yes,
religion.
yes, yes.
There's no way to have
Neutrality. Yeah,
it.
is a myth.
So I think that that's the concern the secular elites have. They'll say the poor Muslims, the poor atheists, you're just you're being bigoted against them when you say these kinds of things, that you want Christianity somehow privileged and having the access that these other groups, I guess, don't have. And the Christians who are against it, there's a number of objections, but the main one seems to be that all you're going to do is you're going to create a bunch of hypocrites, because they're going to engage in the prayer before school, but they're not going to really mean it. And neither is the teacher who's giving the prayer. And so all you've done is you create these wannabe Christians or pretend Christians, and they're not really Christians, and they have a false sense of security. Uh,
Mm.
so I think those are the main objections to this whole thing. But you're absolutely right to say none of this works unless you have Christians in areas of authority.
Yeah.
So in Bible Belt areas, this actually might make sense. And
Mm.
where I live right now, I don't really have any hope of that. Like, I'm gonna vote for a Jewish guy or even a Muslim guy or a cat. I'm Protestant. I'll vote for a Catholic guy
Yeah.
who is going to promote some good common sense policies over the crazy radical leftist. Right? I don't
Totally.
really have the
Yes.
option here of voting for someone like Dusty Devers in Oklahoma, who's self-proclaimed Christian nationalist.
Mm.
But if I had that option, if I had someone who was very out there with their faith and wanted to, have Christian values and a Christian identity, I would vote for him. But
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
so, and it would change. It would change the way that my region is. The more people get elected, they're going to bring their values with them. And that is going to change the region.
Mhm.
So it's both and it is both having Christian standards and having Christian politicians and leaders,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, but that's the thing. It's like we're not going to just take office. I mean, I don't, are people scared that that's what's going to happen, that they're not going to be elected, that they're going to just step in and take it? I mean, I know there was some kind of, and I'm not real well versed on this drama. You might not be either, or you might be like, this is off topic. But I know there was kind of some drama in the last few months in the Christian sphere, discussing the I'm blanking on the word, the Catholic, oh man,
Calvin Robinson.
well, not yes, but that's not what I'm thinking about.
Oh, okay.
The It's a really common word where they went across Europe. It was against the Muslims and the
Crusades.
Christians. The
The Crusades.
Crusades, there it is. There's been a lot of drama around the Crusades. Is that, do you think, what people are afraid of? That Christians, people who,
Yeah, some people seem to take that seriously and
that
think,
they're really going to step up with violence and take over?
well, yeah, and this is coming at a time, you got to understand, this is not just America, this is Europe,
Hmm.
where in places like England and France, Catholic and Protestant countries, you have an incredible amount of Muslims from North Africa and from the Middle East as refugees coming in because of the policies of their governments. And so I think it's very natural for Christians and Catholics in those areas to look back in the past to try to find heroes who would represent a objection to what's happening to their cultures, because they're losing everything. They're
Yeah, yeah,
losing.
totally.
So I think that's the way to explain why there's maybe a renewed interest in the Crusades, studying the Crusades. But I haven't actually seen any serious effort to do anything violent. And of course, even that effort was with the sanction of governments. So you'd have to be able to
Mm.
get um, enough people in your country to agree with you that we need a militarization or a police action in order to deal with these kinds of things. And we're nowhere close to any of that in any of these countries. So I think it's a lot of hype.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was a controversy. I think of Anthea Butler, who's I think she's MSNBC reporter. She said Ron DeSantis with the whole, remember the "Don't Say Gay" bill,
Yeah.
that was Christian nationalism. So
Wow.
I think some of these more secular critics of it, they think that you don't need any more Christian politicians being elected. The ones
Mm.
who are already there, like Ron DeSantis, are enough. They're going to wake up one day and use their power to suppress homosexuality or something. And that's their fear, I think.
Yeah. Oh man, you spurred a thought. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was going to say, I feel like I've seen hit pieces even just against Moscow. I actually had a
Yeah.
friend who, because I've been following, I probably found Doug Wilson's work. Maybe I was real late to that game, and there's a whole funny story there as to how I found his stuff, but maybe like a year or two before I found you, or apparently when you started. And I remember I had a friend who spoke to me, and she was basically saying that she felt like his work was dangerous. And
Mhm.
I could not wrap my head around. I'm like, I don't like, she was saying that he wanted to take over the town. And I just, I mean, honestly, he's got such a large amount of work. Maybe there's been stuff I haven't, of course there's been stuff I haven't seen, but him saying stuff around that I haven't seen. But I'm thinking like 6 years later, I'm like, I've never seen him infer at all that like, we're going to take this town by force, whether you like it or not. I'm like, it sounds to me like he's just saying, just live your faith out in public like everyone else does, with their worldview and their ethics, their view of ethics. Yeah, you can say whatever you were going to say, but that was just my thought.
Yeah, I think in fact, this week, I think there was another hit piece on Doug Wilson. I haven't read it yet. I have it screenshot. That's how material for the program. I screenshot it on my phone and go back over it. But
Yeah.
I have an article I need to read on that. And I'm sure it's going to say what all the other articles have said, which is basically that he's trying to coalesce enough people in the town of Moscow, Idaho, to take over the government mechanism. And then once that happens, it's going to be really scary. So they're afraid of a future that has been unrealized.
Yeah.
Whereas I think
Yeah.
conservatives are more afraid of things that actually have been realized and things
Yeah.
that have precedence in the past more so.
Yeah.
But I think in this case, they're they're banking on the fact that people will disagree with his views and they'll play some of his views on sexuality or even the Bible's teaching on slavery or the Bible's
Hmm.
teaching on women or any of
Hmm.
these things. And secular people who aren't used to hearing that might be shocked, and then they'll try to convince them, well, if these guys take over, you're going to see a reinstitution of these things. Women aren't going to be able to vote anymore. You're going to have slaves again. You're going to I guess I don't know, I don't even know. Like a lot of it's couched in just you could almost hear like the scary background music, but you don't really know what it is. It's very shadowy.
Yeah.
So I think that Doug Wilson's become somewhat of a target in all this
Uh-huh.
because
Lightning rod.
he is a lightning rod. Yeah, he
Hmm.
he is pretty outspoken on what he believes, and he doesn't sometimes couch his words with a lot of uh, you know nuance, and he doesn't try to appeal to secular elites, which I think a lot of Christian leaders, that's exactly how they talk. That's what they do. Even if they believe what he does, they will not say it the way he says it. They'll try to make a million qualifications.
Totally.
And
Yes.
so and he's independent. He has his own press. He's got a number of things going on there, a media empire that isn't accountable to anyone.
Yeah.
So there's nothing they can do to stop him. Whereas if you're in the Southern Baptist Convention, let's say you're a preacher who said something that was kind of off color and it scared some people, you just make a few phone calls to elites in the SBC and they'll put tremendous pressure on you. And that goes that way for most denominations and organizations. Doug doesn't have that.
Yeah, yeah. And I've really, it's been really interesting. I'm not necessarily trying to go off onto a tangent with this, but seeing some of the debates and the drama that's been going off in like the reformed world on X lately between different churches and different ministries. And I'm really appreciative of all of these. I guess we're calling them like legacy ministries if we're lumping canon in with that. I am so like, I just met Doug Wilson for the first time, like maybe a month or 2 months ago. And it was like, wow, same thing. I'm like, I've been watching you for years now. Like, nice to meet you in person. And I am just so appreciative of the work that Canon Press has done, the stuff that they've put out, the stuff his daughters have done. That being said, simultaneously, I appreciate the debate that's going on online. I know that it's like stressing some people out, but I think it's interesting and it's worthwhile to have these like intellectual conversations. And obviously, as time goes on, as I don't know, the Overton window shifts or whatever, I think they're all worthwhile conversations. But man, I have so much admiration for what they've done up there in Moscow. And they've like impacted my family in a very tangible way. Just had to throw that out there. I don't
Yeah.
know on
Well,
that note.
Nikki, I think you're actually channeling what most people think about. Most people listening may not even know about drama, and that's
Mm,
okay. But I think that the ranks are thin, and so you look around you and you think there's a lot of these more secular, pagan, if you want to call them that, elites who would love to
What does
destroy.
the ranks are thin mean? Does that just mean there's not that many people in that
Yeah,
position?
there's very few people willing to take a stand for Christianity in the
Okay.
here and the blowback they're going to get for it.
Mm,
Someone who says, I believe the Bible and I'm not going to apologize for anything that it says. It's very rare to find
mm-hmm.
someone who actually will live that out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you find someone like Doug Wilson and you find someone like the guys in Ogden, Utah, or
Yeah.
Joel Webben, who, that they're kind of the focal point of some of this dispute. They're all willing to say basically what I just said, that I believe the Bible, I'm going to take a stand. And I think most people are like you, where it's like, I know you guys have arguments. Maybe they're important, but I'm just thankful for all of you because I really want to see someone
Yes.
fighting these giants out there, and
Yes.
not many willing to do it. So
Yes, exactly. It's like it's both. I appreciate the debates and the arguments. It's interesting and I think they're worthwhile, but exactly the ranks are thin. That's a good way to word it. Okay, this is kind of going back. I don't know if I'm gonna keep this part in. I'll have to ask him if I'm allowed to say this on the internet. I think I am because it was so long ago. But and I don't even know if this will jump off into a worthwhile part of the conversation, but you made me think about it when we were talking about things that used to be done a certain way and how just, everything has slowly changed. I mean, literally everything, including just technology, the fact that I can even talk to you from across the country. But, my husband back in high school, so that was over 20 years ago, he actually did some jail time for having a buck knife in his car. And we were talking about a week or two ago, and it was like the first time it had ever really occurred to me. I was like, do you realize, Dan, that kids used to go to school like with their shotguns and like leave them at the door? I was like, you did jail time and it took years to get this misdemeanor like expunged off his record for having a buck knife in your car, like not even in the classroom. And it's just fascinating to me because obviously we have a very vibrant, though that seems like the wrong tone of a word, conversation going around, gun rights in schools, and you were talking about prayers in school. I am personally, if people feel like they're supposed to send their kids to school, I do believe every family is different, but I am very anti-government schools. I am very pro homeschooling. But I think it's just interesting, even in those small ways. Like, I don't know if we want to call that a Christian worldview. I don't know, to be able to have your weapon and protect yourself. But I thought that that was really interesting. I don't know if you even have any thoughts on that or if you're just like, cool. I can.
you said, I'm a big advocate of gun rights, and I think that it you have to have a society that is self-governing and responsible to be able to
There it is.
trust people with gun rights. But I it doesn't. So I think in different regions it's going to look a little bit different.
Mm,
But the idea that criminals are just not going to have guns and we can disarm the population, that's ridiculous.
yeah.
Look at Chicago for primary.
For reference.
If you're going to
Not
do that,
funny.
you have to increase the police presence substantially. If you're not going to increase, and this is what we've seen, I think, is we've seen two things happen at the same time. One is the police are racist, and we should make sure that there's policies that defund them, or we don't want as many of them on the streets. So
Mm,
they're hire as many, and we don't give them their ability to actually engage is hampered by these policies. The Ferguson effect basically is what I'm talking about.
mm.
We've had that go on, and simultaneously we've also had, and you shouldn't have guns. It's like, well, I mean, if you're going to take my gun away from me, like, don't I need someone protecting me? Right. So uh, it's very evil, in my opinion, what is going on in these inner city areas. And there's no reason, absolutely no reason, in especially a rural area or even I think a suburban area, to not allow people to have firearms. So
Yeah, I
we're
mean, sorry, go
restricted.
on. Sorry,
Yeah,
say what you just said.
yeah, we're way too restricted. And yeah, I think it is part of a Christian understanding. Um, it's not like I don't think in the Bible you're going to see necessarily chapter and verse on like this is what gun rights should look like. There weren't
Hmm,
even
hmm,
guns at
hmm.
that point, but we do see that there is a responsibility husbands have to take care of their families. That would include protect them, and
Hmm.
we do find Jesus even endorsing the idea of taking swords. His apostles taking swords because of the dangers on the roads and so forth.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, the more the government gets corrupt and the less they can protect you, the more need there is to be able to have weapons.
Yeah, I mean, I remember growing up, the joke was always like, and this isn't, I do, this isn't disrespect. I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to an officer that's watching this, but the joke growing up was like you watch a movie and something goes down and then it's done and then the cops show up and you're like, where were they? And I know
Right,
that I know that's like not I'm not saying that that's how things always pan out, right? It's a movie, but this general idea that like you should be the first responder in general. I mean, I believe that in general with a lot of things in terms of our health too. It's like too many
right.
people I think have just given up the responsibility of their own health to professionals, in white coats. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it was kind of a side note, but I
People
was just
forget too that the Second Amendment's there because of the government. And so the founding fathers,
totally.
tremendous faith in the American people that they could own these weapons and that they could stand against a tyrannical government, and if ever came to that.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Speaking of that, the founding fathers, history, how do I loop back to this? Okay. We were talking about narratives. Just and the way they've been changed. I also don't even, I feel like all of my questions are prefaced with this, like, I don't even really know where I'm going with this. You've done a great job surfing off of all of them. I just want to throw that out there.
Oh,
But I've had this thought for a while, particularly once I moved to the South. I lived in Nashville for about 4 years. We actually ended up moving out of there when everything unfolded with COVID because no offense, Nashvillians, there's got to be people everywhere, just like how I'm originally from Los Angeles. I know there are solid believers in LA. But once COVID stuff unfolded, it became really apparent to us that it was like a fake conservative city. It was like just like the major cities on the coast. It was wild. But one thing I became more aware of once I lived in the South was like, oh, there's a whole other narrative about like what happened with the Civil War, the war between the states, what is another one they call it, like the invasion from the North or something like that.
yeah, northern
Yeah,
aggression.
northern aggression. I was not aware of any of this. And I have to say that under the pretense, if that's the way we want to put it, that when I left school, so I went to a private Christian school till sixth grade, and then I became homeschooled from sixth grade on. And in eighth grade, I believe it was, maybe it was ninth grade, I tested into our local community college. And I took every single history class that our local community college offered, just because my parents were big into like, just follow the things that you like and you love. And that's what education should be, right? So I was like, I like history. So I took all the history classes. I never heard that there were these other terms, which obviously greatly implies that there's another narrative or another slant to seeing how history unfolded. You are someone else who I've heard kind of touch on this idea that, like, hey, maybe the way that the South has been painted is not really the way that the South was. Like, it's not an accurate representation. So yeah, I don't know even really specifically what the question is, or if you have anything you'd like to say. Oh, I'm frozen again. It's another cute position. Come on, move, camera, move. If history has proven that if we give it 2 seconds, it will yeah, there we go. So I don't know if you have anything you want to say in regards to the South, American history, and the way that it's treated the South, but this is something that is new in my world, so I find it fascinating. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I
you have any.
did a documentary last year called the 1607 Project, and it
Yes.
was an answer to the 1619 Project and also the 1776 Commission,
Mm,
which was supposed to be the answer to the 1619 Project, but I think it fell short.
mm,
And one of the things that I guess it's the main thesis really that we try to show in that documentary is that Virginia really is responsible more than any other colony for defining what America became. And
mm,
uh, Virginia is often left out of the story. And this is really something that's taken place since the Civil War when the North uh, beat the South, and the North was in a position to exclusively tell their side of the story. So they're going to obviously center their own characters and their own
mm,
history in that. But we tried to give you, if you will, the other side of that, and show that Virginia is very influential in the South more broadly. And we show this on a number of different ways. We talk about military generals and so forth, and the kind of generals the South produced. We talk about Southern politics and the idea of leadership in the South and how different that was than leadership in the North. We talk about the economy. We do talk about slavery a bit and the conditions of slavery. We talk about cuisine. So there's a number of different things, even beyond that, that we music. That was another one.
Yeah,
We
just
talked
to throw it out there, I have not finished the documentary
about. Oh
yet.
no.
Just wanted that to be part of the understanding as you're talking about this. I've
Yeah.
watched about a third of it. Sometimes it takes me a minute to get through different pieces. I have to like turn around and come back. But I liked what I saw so far. Keep
Yeah.
going.
I think it's helpful for people to maybe start there because there is this bigger narrative that's beyond the Civil War. It's not just about a 4-year period. It is about
Mm,
two civilizations that clashed, and some would even trace it back to the English Civil War. That there has been this the difference between those who settled in the South, those who settled in the North. In the North, more Puritans; in the South, more Cavaliers, and then a mix of them within the more Appalachian regions, the Scots Irish. And
mm,
that's to this day, that's if you're outside of urban areas, I can't speak for Nashville, but if you're outside of the major cities where northern industries have come back in and so forth, then you're either talking about Scotch Irish people or these Cavaliers essentially and their descendants. So that
interesting.
brought a particular kind of culture. And if you ever have you ever seen like Downton Abbey? I don't know. Some people get
I've
really.
only seen a couple episodes. I haven't watched the series now.
My wife got into that a little bit, and some people get way too into it. But
It seems like a series that's worth getting into. I
yeah,
just haven't
I,
gotten
I
into
think
it.
so. I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't watched it, but I know enough about it to know that they depict this. You wouldn't call it feudalism, but this society where there's definitely a hierarchy, and
Mm,
you have servants and you have masters. Essentially, you have dignitaries and royalty, and these are all the things that we're told now are essentially bad. Monarchy is bad. Arranged marriage is bad.
mm-hmm.
All the social arrangements of the past that had some kind of a hierarchical element, patriarchy, they're all bad. Well, of course, labor arrangements are grouped into this. So feudalism, uh, slavery, obviously, and serfdom. These things are all horrible, horrible things. And I think that understanding the Southern culture and how the conditions of slavery, how they viewed slavery is essential to understanding the labor system itself. So this is where
Mm,
I think starting with primary sources is important. So looking at the slave narratives, reading those. Some
mm.
woke people today think you shouldn't even read the slave narratives. They don't want to trust the slaves to tell you how the conditions were. They would rather
I've heard that before, that they
right.
say that it's because they
They lie.
think that
They
the
all lie.
slaves, yeah, that they weren't speaking or that they were too scared to tell the truth.
Yeah, and and I'll tell you why that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and they're talking specifically about the Works Project Administration's
Mm,
narratives in the 1940s. The slave
mm.
narratives go beyond that. There's slave narratives that are more contemporary with slavery itself. Obviously the social justice warriors love Frederick Douglass, and they'll say read that. That's the slave narrative.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the thing is, the slave narratives do show about a good 20% have negative things to say about their masters,
Mm,
and then the majority have all these wonderful positive things to say. And
mm.
so they'll say that you have to discredit it, but where did the 20% come from? If they were all afraid, and if there was these gatekeepers who didn't want anything negative said about slavery, who apparently are from the federal government of all places, they're really pro-slavery in the federal government at this time, I guess, in the 1940s.
Interesting.
Why did they not sift out the 20% of slaves who said their narrative said very nasty things or negative things about their masters?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense. That's just, I think, a cope. Um,
Mm.
so I don't want to get into unless you want me to
No, I
deep
know.
conditions, but I think that understanding how the society functioned is essential. And this goes back to even the founding fathers. Many of them, we talked about Jefferson before,
Hmm.
were involved in a slave system. Many of them did not want that to continue. They wanted slaves to have personal responsibility. They inherited the slaves. It wasn't something
Hmm.
they chose. It was something that they had to deal with.
Mm.
And many of them wanted to treat them with Christian charity and do so, get to do away with the institution in a responsible manner. Um, as it pertains to slavery, I think the abolitionists who they were fighting essentially or disagreeing with
Mm.
wanted more of an irresponsible end to it. And that is what we got. We got an end to slavery where about 1 million slaves
Mm.
starved and got diseases after the war died. Uh,
Man.
they were freed in a war torn area. The conditions were horrible. They became
Mm.
dependent on the federal government, which is a problem we've had till this day.
Mm.
Um, what they ended up disrupting the society in such a way that it caused some cures are worse than their disease, and it caused all these other problems. So anyone who thinks the South is justified in the war between the states or the Civil War, I've never met anyone who is upset that slavery is gone. I think every person agrees, including myself, that
Mm.
this was not ideal. It should never have happened, and but there was a better way to end this practice, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't um, ending it through bloodshed in an immediate fashion without the opportunity to compensate and integrate slaves into society was a horrible, horrible thing. And so I think that's usually where the discussion goes. Now, I'll say one other thing. I don't want to talk too long about this because I know I'm going on a while, but
No, you're good.
I think some separations also have to be made on the slavery issue and looking at the war as a whole. So you have the lower South secedes from the Union,
Okay.
and I think 4 states cite slavery directly as one of the reasons. It's not the only reason. There's tariffs. There's an
Mm-hmm.
economic policy that they disagree with, but when they cite slavery, they are talking about the ability to expand slavery into the territories. That's not the moral question of slavery, whether it's right or wrong. That's the question.
Mm.
And it's not about whether there should be more slaves. The
Mm.
Confederate Constitution actually outlaws the slave trade. So what they're saying is that the North does not want Southern influence into Western territories because the elites of that society mostly own slaves. So by preventing them from going into the Western territories, you're preventing the South from going in. That was their critique, and they thought
Mm.
it was unconstitutional. They said the Constitution doesn't say this, but this is what you're forcing us to adopt. And so they thought if you're not going to abide by the Constitution, what reason do we have to remain in the Union? So that's the lower South, and there could be more said, but the upper South, so Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, even I would say Arkansas. Well, I think Missouri at the very least. That was kind of a swing or a border state, but Kentucky was a border state. But these regions, even Maryland, which almost seceded, their issue wasn't that. Their issue was that Lincoln had called troops in to invade the lower South, and that's when they seceded. And they said, "We're not going to be part of this. If you're just going to
Mm.
invade part of the country," because the understanding was that the government at that time, this is called compact theory, but that the states are essentially the masters of the federal arrangement.
Mm.
Republican Party, Lincoln's party, had a different philosophy. They believed that the federal arrangement was actually the master of the states. And so,
So
obviously,
interesting.
now the slavery topic's coming back again, but not in the same way. Now we're talking about civil slavery.
Mm.
So, after the war was over, it went from the United States are to the United States is. The United States is now one holistic entity with Washington, D.C. ruling everything. It
Mm.
wasn't like that before.
Mm.
And this is now the civil slavery I suppose we all live in because you don't have the
Okay,
choice.
that's what you're saying. I thought that's what you were saying. Sorry, keep going, keep going.
Yeah, so there's different forms of slavery, and
Yes,
so
yes.
we got rid of chattel slavery,
Mm-hmm.
but now we're in a situation where you have civil slavery, you have generational welfare that starts developing,
Mm-hmm.
you have
You will never own the land that you live on. That is fascinating to me that you
yep,
can't ever really outright own your house. You always have to pay on it. This
yep,
is this is something that I have been trying to find and I still haven't quite found it. So this is part of what I appreciate about like just hearing all these words from you is I've been trying to find the words once again in talks with my parents around this idea that it's like, hey, I'm not trying to downplay chattel slavery. Like that's horrific for so many reasons that you just mentioned. But there is this feeling of like we're all living under some form of slavery essentially. And so you say civil slavery, that's
yeah, yeah.
fascinating. I've never
Well,
heard
think
that
about it
word.
this way: you and I have grown up in a world where we've inherited certain forms of slavery. We're just not accustomed to calling them that. So we
Yeah.
have generational welfare, we have debt. The United States is in a lot of
Yes.
debt, and individuals are in a lot of debt. That's
Uh-huh.
slavery, according to Proverbs. We have sex slavery all
Yeah.
around us in the shadows, but it's
Yeah.
there. We have sweatshop labor and so forth that goes
Uh-huh.
into our phones. There's actual, basically, slaves in Africa who are
That's
mining for
yes.
cobalt, which is in some of our electronics. Right? We have
Yes.
a prison system that didn't exist before, and
Dude,
that's a
yes.
slavery.
And we
All of these
imprison
things.
so many people in the States.
Yeah, yeah, but we think we're so good because look, we ended this one form of slavery, but we have all these other forms that have
Mm-hmm.
come about. So here's the thing: hierarchies and even labor hierarchies are always going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
If I was going to say tomorrow, let's end the welfare system, that would be extremely irresponsible of me to end it immediately, right? We would all
Mm,
say, well, you have people dependent on this. You got to figure out a way to gradually get them off of that.
that's a
That's
good
really
point.
what people like Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis and Stonewall Jackson and these guys that were revered in the South, they had the similar view.
Mm,
Uh, Jefferson Davis, I mean, the thing is, people don't understand these men either. Like Jefferson Davis, when he was in Congress, he actually introduced a law that would give slaves the ability to invent their own and have a patent for their own inventions. He
mm,
adopted a black boy, while he was in the Confederate White House, he adopted a black
wow.
son.
Wow.
He was stayed with his slaves after the war because they loved him. Robert E. Lee,
Wow.
he inherited slaves from his wife, and he couldn't free them because they were dependent.
Wow.
But he wanted to. Stonewall Jackson taught a slave Sunday school class. There's still in Roanoke, Virginia, a mural, or it's a little like, I don't know what they would call it. It's like a stained glass thing, I think, but it's recognizing that he had trained pastors that one of them ended up going to that church and starting that
Wow.
church. So, I mean, these guys all loved the African Americans around them and
Mm,
wanted their conditions. And this is the thing that you have to think about. There's a difference between status and conditions sometimes. Sometimes if we could all have the equal status of being miserable and having no money and not being able to eat. And we're
yeah.
all
Yeah.
equal. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
equal,
Yeah.
right? We've achieved equality.
It's so equitable.
It's so equitable. We're equally miserable.
Yeah.
But and that's often how social justice types think about it. And I think the abolitionists as a group thought sometimes in these terms a little. Well, I don't want to say that, but I think the way we remember that conflict, I'll put it this way, is a neo-abolitionist narrative where we look back and we say things are more equal now and it's better, but we ignore the conditions. We
Mm,
ignore what actually happened to these people when they were freed, what actually happened to their descendants, and
mm,
has it all been good for them? And I think that's what a lot of the critics of immediate abolition said. They said, look, the Northeast was the one who they went and got the slaves. There's Northeastern merchants. We paid you for them. So you
oh,
have,
wow. I
oh
don't know that I knew that. Wow.
yeah, no. The slave trade. So there's a slave trade and then there's the slavery as a
Yeah, an
labor system.
institution.
So
Yeah.
the slave trade was primarily, at least in America, accomplished by Northeasterners who they were the seafarers. They're the ones that had so Rhode
Yeah.
Island
Yeah.
and
Like New
New
York.
York
Uh-huh.
Harbor. These were the big
Okay. This
states,
makes sense. Yes.
and even when they went to Charleston and so forth, I mean, it was northern ships that were bringing them there primarily. So they they bring them the slaves, they make all the money off of this, and then they're, well, you can't have them anymore. And that was one of the things, is like, well, you got to compensate us. Like, this is going to be an
Mm.
economic disaster.
Yeah. There's
We
like so many moving parts to this.
Yeah, and then the other thing is you got to integrate. So
Hmm.
you can't just bottle up all these people in the South. We need the West. So this is Thomas Jefferson's theory of diffusion. But he said, if we could let slaves go into or black people in general, go into the territories out west,
Hmm.
they could obtain the kind of they would be let alone by people who are racially, in the North and South.
Mm,
The North was the North was where the Jim Crow stuff started. So they
mm,
didn't want slaves in their territories or having influence. So
mm,
if you put them in the territories or let them go there, they can gain personal responsibility, and that would necessitate freedom.
mm,
And so Thomas Jefferson liked this, but the problem was the Republican Party wanted the Western territories for free white labor. They didn't want any blacks there. They wanted whites only. So this is
mm,
one of the complaints the South had was, so you're just going to basically bottle them. You're going to free them all, and then they have nowhere to go. They don't have the ability to live on their own, at least
mm,
all of them. And we just kind of have to deal with this problem, even though we've paid, you've taken all our money. Like, this just doesn't seem fair, and it's going to cause problems. And so they never could reach an agreement on how to handle this.
mm,
Uh, Lincoln thought, let's ship him back to Africa. That was
mm,
Abraham Lincoln's solution at one point, or at least he was thinking about it.
mm.
But this is, I mean, these are horrible things in our modern context. To say these things sounds terrible, but this is how people thought back then, and these
Yeah.
are the debates that were happening. So what happened in history is we became the one country in the entire world that, in the modern era at least, that ended slavery through a horrible war
Mm.
and didn't do it peacefully. Every other country basically was able to do this peacefully.
Wow.
Brazil was the latest one to do it in the 1880s, but they did, slavery was on its way out. You had mechanization, and, it wasn't going to last forever. And, but we had this war that we all celebrate, but it's like was it even necessary? Could have there been a better way? And I think you're not supposed to say that now. That's politically incorrect. You know, if you include this in part of the interview in the video, you get
What,
all
you're
kinds.
not supposed to say that there could have been a better way?
Oh yeah, no, that's
Oh, interesting.
no, you can't. No, you're a neo-Confederate. You're a Southern
Oh,
slavery
snap.
apologist.
I'm an Angelino native. No,
Yeah,
that all makes sense to me. Sorry, keep going, but that makes sense.
yeah. So I mean, I've been called all these names and stuff, and it's like, it doesn't matter how many times I say I think I'm against slavery. I think that the slave trade was evil. I think that this
Mm,
should have been done away with. But I think that the way we did away with it was bad, and we've ended up waking up into a world where we have all these other horrors
mm,
that we don't consider bad because we just don't think they're of them as slavery. Some of the ones
mm,
I outlined before,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but we have all of these things, and so I think prudent people we're not irresponsible when we think of making social changes that are drastic. We think about what what effect is this going to have downstream from this decision, and it may be a good thing that we're trying to end, but the cure could be worse. And I think the Civil War was a tragedy. I think there's good and
Agreed.
bad on both sides, like most conflicts. But I think that constitutionally, I think the South they were correct. I think they had the right to secede, and that's what the war was over. So when people
Mm-hmm.
say the war wasn't about slavery, that's what they're saying. They're saying you didn't have to have a war over these conflicts of the tariff issue and the slavery, slavery extension issue, or whatever you want to call it, the
Yeah, yeah.
having slavery in the Western territories. You didn't need to have a war. These states could have just left, but Lincoln wanted to. He says it in his first inaugural. He says basically, if you just let me collect the revenue, I will leave you alone. That's all I want to do.
Woo!
So this was a better
Whoa.
question to ask about why that war happened, I think, is not why did the South secede. The question to ask is why did the North invade? That's why we had a war. You didn't have to have a war. It's like with Great Britain. It's the same thing. The American colonies seceded from Great Britain. You
Mm.
didn't have to have a war, but Britain decided to invade.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why you had a war.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Uh,
horrifying to think about how many people, if the numbers are correct. I've heard that more people died in the Civil War than like all of our other wars combined, like Americans. I don't know if you've heard the
yeah,
same thing that it's like
yeah,
more
that's
than,
true. That's true. Or it's pretty close. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's horrifying. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm just kind of agreeing with like, yes, it's horrifying.
Over 600,000 people in the Civil War. I think some estimates are saying it's higher. But the real crazy thing is now how many people actually died in the South, especially among the slave populations after the war.
Oof.
That's what I think there's been a lot more progress on. We don't know the exact numbers, but
Mm.
there was a lot of starvation. I mean, Sherman, my family in Mississippi was basically burned out of their homes from Sherman's army. So
Whoa.
we couldn't even trace our family genealogy for years because the
Whoa.
churches were all burned. He burned the churches where the records were kept. And
Wow.
it was a mile wide path, went right through where so I have ancestors who are on both sides, but I have Confederate ancestors who
Hmm.
um, none of them owned slaves. They were all poor as dirt. It's only about 5% of the Southern population owned slaves, and they weren't in that elite
It's
class.
incredible.
So they went to fight. Why? Because they're being invaded. That's why they fought.
Yeah, yeah.
So I do have some resentment, I suppose, when I'm told like, you know, your your ancestors basically they just fought for slavery. They wanted slaves. Like none
Yeah,
of them ever
yeah.
had hope or a thought of ever having slaves, but they were in starvation for years and
Mm.
on that poverty line. And really until my dad was the first one to go to college in the family.
Wow.
And my grandfather, he grew up impoverished on a cotton farm in
Yeah,
Mississippi.
yeah. I've
He
heard you
eventually
mention
left
that.
the state, and but he, as a boy, and my grandpa died last year. But
That's right.
as a boy, my grandpa knew slaves. He knew Confederate soldiers.
Mm.
So I would talk to him about these things, and so it's very real for me
Yeah, yeah.
to talk about this because it's part of my family history as well.
And I can
But
feel that from you when you talk about it. It's that you've not only studied it, but that it's in your, yeah, it's part of
yeah,
your real life as well.
well, where I live now, I'm in New York. There's a Northern monument down the street. I would stand and defend that if someone tried to rip it
Mm,
down or vandalize it, I defend it. I feel the same way about the Southern monuments. So I feel the same way about both. I think these were men of valor. I think
mm,
there's many men, even in my family, who had good motives and they thought they were preserving the Union. And um, I think this is part of our story, Nikki, yours and mine. And to then excise one part of it and say, this isn't America. Let's just tuck every sinful, evil thing, patriarchy, we can think of that's bad, we'll just tuck it into that little corner of the South, and we'll say
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the Bible Belt, it's the Christians.
Exactly.
I'm kind of defensive of that. I say, no, this is all part of our story, and no other country has done this, where
Yeah.
they in the Western world, at least, we don't look into our past and say, we're just ashamed of that part, so we're going to say it's not part of us. It's not. No, it is. It shaped who we are, and so yeah, I think that's important for history. You have to. This is the last thing I'll say is, whenever you're crafting a narrative, I think you have to come up with a paradigm that makes sense of all the facts. You can't.
Totally. That's what I was going to say, is this all makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can't come up with a paradigm that only cherry picks certain facts. You have to make sense of all of them. So yes, you have to make sense of the fact that there were slaves who were abused. You have to make sense of the fact that there were racists, or in a sense of, I don't like using that word because it's been so, but there were people that hated Black people in the Republican Party, and really across the board. There are people who didn't want Black people integrated into society and so forth. These are all things that are out of step with our current fashions, but we have to recognize those things in order to make sense of what happened in our past. And if we just look at ones, if we don't look at the Republican Party and their policies and their Jim Crow laws and so forth, we only look at the South and their views, then you're going to have a lopsided version of the story.
Yeah. I know it's overused, and you may not use this word, but to me, it feels like nuance as well, has just been taken out. There tends to be these broad brushes swept across narratives that need to be pushed so that everybody can just get it, ingest it. It's basic. It's there's a lot more to it than this. And you talking about this is kind of a random jump off, but these generals that have been had their stories completely twisted, or they've left out the parts of them that would make a holistic person, and maybe even someone that you would admire or look up to, and it's been taken out. It makes me think, this is so random, but I'm currently reading through, do you know who Coach John Wooden is?
No.
Okay. He was a famous coach for UCLA for a very long time. Anyways, he wrote a book, and he's he actually passed away now, but he's a believer. He's a Christian. And something he talks about in the book is the difference between your character and your reputation. And if that is not something that hit me square over the head during our cancellation process, was coming to the realization that oh, your character is not the same thing as your reputation, because the world can take it and they can twist whatever kind of story they want for whatever purposes they have. But it's really amazing that you and people like you, and just that more people are becoming woke to this idea that hey, I don't think all the facts have quite been filled in about these people, because in a really basic way, it really stinks that some of these people, there's so much more to them. And like I said, that is even maybe admirable or worth emulating, if that's the way we want to put it, that has just been completely cut out of history. So,
well, Robert E. Lee was a hero up until recently to everyone. I mean, Eisenhower loved Robert E. Lee. John F. Kennedy, I think, said good things about him. Even in the Christian world, I have quotes from R.C. Sproul. R.C. Sproul had a picture of Robert E. Lee as you entered his house, and Stonewall Jackson.
Wow.
And he said that his three heroes were Martin Luther and then those two guys.
Wow.
It was, Crew even put out stuff, that Robert E. Lee was this great leader.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or at least, who's the guy that started Crew?
I don't remember. I just know the gist of them.
Bill Bright,
kind of where they've gone. Yeah. Okay.
Bill Bright wrote a book, and it was very commending Robert E. Lee. So this is something very recent. We have to understand, it wasn't that long ago when you had television shows and musical performances and so forth, where they'd even use Confederate imagery, and no one thought it was racist. No one thought this is, are there Black people around? They're going to think it's terrible. It was just I'm proud to be Southern. That's kind of how it was.
Yeah.
And it really is from 2015, I'd say 2015 to today, when we've seen this really aggressive push to get to just disappear all of it. It never existed. And that's the thing that kind of is surreal to me, is wow, it's actually possible to do that. You can literally disappear a symbol and anything associated with that symbol, and then only have one narrative for it. Anyone that has this symbol or wants a monument to Robert E. Lee, they're racist. That's insane to me. That's absolutely insane. But the thing is, I think, so here's where I think I'm even more concerned. We were so close, really close to doing that to Washington and Jefferson. Like,
Mm.
like we were on the cusp of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it kind of like like the woke stuff kind of pushed too far and we let off. But
Mm-hmm.
the next push, whenever that comes, that's going to be the next target.
Totally.
Because I mean, in Virginia where I live, they renamed, I think it was Jefferson High School. They were trying to get rid of a Washington statue was taken off the Episcopal Church where he used to attend. Like it was
Mm.
happening.
Wow.
It was starting. So
Yeah, and that's around the time I moved to Nashville. So I was just becoming a woke again. I keep using that word, but you get it. To all of this when you said the tides were starting to shift. It's so wild my timing and move to Nashville in general because it all really aligned with a very large cultural shift. And I don't think that that's, happenstance. It's just very interesting to me looking back.
were you in Nashville out of curiosity, 2020, July 4th? Were you there?
What? Yes, I was.
I was there too. So I was visiting. And
What
do
were
you
you
remember?
doing there?
I was with my wife. We're taking a trip. We were down,
Okay.
on the strip there.
Yeah, yeah. Broadway.
Right, and the just walking around. And I remember it was July 4th.
Uh-huh.
All of a sudden, all the trash cans, they like the city officials they take all the trash cans away. And I was like, what is going on here? Why are you taking? I asked Guy, he's like, we could have some serious riots. And thankfully it didn't go to Broadway, but there
Whoa.
was a big,
Oh, that's right. That was the summer of the riots. That's right. And my
yeah,
brain is trying to remember the timeline of everything. Yes, I was still in Nashville at that time. And sorry, the timing is all coming into focus. Yes.
yeah. And then down at City Hall, they had there was a
Uh-huh.
big protest and
Mm-hmm.
we were like in our Airbnb, just looking at the TV, hoping it wasn't gonna, come where we were. Or whatever. I don't know, but
Yeah, that's about the time that I said to my parents, I'm like, do we need to go to Idaho? And my parents, oh no, frozen again. I'm like, at least freeze when I'm not talking, camera. Come on. It'll 2 seconds. There we go. I said to my parents, I'm like, do we need to go to Idaho? And they were like, what's in Idaho? And I'm like, the second best homeschooling laws in the US, and I'm not going to Alaska. And I remember my dad was like at the computer and he's all, whoa, have you heard of Coeur d'Alene? And he just like Googled
oh
it or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I have a couple internet friends that live up there. And he's like,
man,
Susie,
there.
we should, that's where I live. Yeah.
Oh man,
Fast
okay, my
forward.
wife. That's like number one on my wife and my list of places. Like I've been
Oh,
to
really?
49 states. Okay.
Okay.
And I've traveled Idaho, but that because we're like with everyone after 2020 is moving, right? So we're
Yeah,
like
yeah.
looking where's a good place. Idaho's like one of the top states for some of the reasons you probably moved there.
Uh-huh.
But she didn't care for Boise as much. She likes trees and forests. So we
Uh-huh.
keep looking at these pictures of Coeur d'Alene and we're like, okay, we got to go there. We got to go there. So we haven't yet, but
Yeah, you got to come visit. My parents came up here for their wedding anniversary. Like they literally just decided that day. They're like, let's go here for our anniversary. They came up, they called us a half hour after being here and they were like, we're moving here. We're like, what? And my parents were in California for like 37 years or something like that. And they had always talked about wanting to move to the mountains, but it was never the right timing for a whole other side list of reasons. And so they moved here. And then we came out to visit them the following January. And then shortly afterwards is when we went through our cancellation process, which was insane. Like, I mean, we had to get like the police involved. There was like actual
oh my
stuff
goodness.
going on from it. So we ended up moving here like way faster than we thought we were going to move here because when it all kind of went down, my parents were like, why are you even there anymore? Like, just come to our basement. The crazy thing is, I mean, I think I've told the internet this. If not, I'll cut it out. But we moved into their basement. The next door neighbor ended up selling us her house. So we live next door to my parents now. It's really like
Oh, that's nice.
such a beautiful, honestly, a dream I didn't know I had, but like a dream come true, especially
You
with
in
my
LA?
kids. You what?
Were you in LA?
I was in LA. Yeah. I'm an Angelino native. Like you are, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was born there, and my
Okay.
family still. In fact, I don't know. One of them may not even be in his house because he was told to
Oh
pack
my
his bag.
gosh.
And then my aunt and my two aunts actually are like one sector. I don't know how they like, but they're very close.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. They're
um,
close.
yeah, maybe you wouldn't have had a house. I don't know where you had your
No,
house,
I
but
know. I mean, well, we've been out of LA now for like 7 years because we went to Nashville for a couple of years and then we came here
mm,
about 3-ish years ago, which is wild to wrap my head around as someone who thought I would never leave LA. But there crossed a point in Los Angeles where it was like, I can't even picture having kids here. Like literally, I could not
yeah,
picture having kids. I was like, but I don't picture myself not having kids. So I think this means we have to leave. So it was amazing. And Nashville was a step in the right direction for what we wanted our life to become. But like I said, with 2020, it was like, oh, just kidding. We're more far right radicals than we realized we were. We got to get out of here.
That's so
So
funny that my wife and I, so that's the two places we're looking at are like the northern Idaho and then outside of Nashville. These are
yeah,
like
yeah.
big, like, okay, these would be good places to move. We
I mean,
haven't.
I loved this. I loved the South. I loved Nashville just once 2020 hit. I watched this show of this family that lives in Tennessee. And every time I watch it, I'm like, man, I really liked Nashville. It was just like the city was, and we were in the city. So it was just
Oh
really
yeah,
not right. So, that area might be great for you guys because out of the city, it's a different story, obviously.
yeah. Inside Nashville, like I noticed from like 10 years ago, and then going back, totally
Mhm.
different place.
Wow.
Totally different. And I I don't. I mean, more crowded, obviously, more traffic. But yeah, I just smelled weed everywhere. Like I don't remember that.
That's so random.
I was
Wow.
last time I went to Nashville, even on Broadway, I was just like, I just keep smelling weed. I don't understand this.
Isn't
Wasn't
that
there
interesting?
10 years
Yeah,
ago.
the short 3 years we were there, the town completely changed. We couldn't believe how fast everything was built up. We're like, whoa, we just got here and everything's changed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't say I would never go back there or to the South because it really did win a place in my heart. But like I said, once the chips were down, if that's the way we want to put it, it was like, I can't do this. You all are like glued to those masks. Like the mask thing was just next level, out of control, couldn't do it. And that was kind of a litmus test. Not really, but kind of.
How's the cuisine in like because Nashville, I mean, they're it's
Ugh,
okay. They have like the chicken, right? And they have some
yeah, yeah.
barbecue and stuff. So like California, Los Angeles has excellent cuisine, in my opinion.
Yeah. LA has my favorite food of anywhere I've ever been.
Right.
The
You
food
know,
in Nashville is brr, sorry guys, and the food in North Idaho is brr, even
it's even
more
worse
so.
than
Yeah,
Nashville.
yeah. There's a couple places that are good up here, and this is, anyone who's watching that owns, it's like whatever, maybe your restaurant is the place I like. There are a couple places I like up here. But in general, I'm fine with it because all it did was it's made me a better home cook. Like I make everything now. You know what I mean? Like all my breads, I've learned how to cook like anything and everything. Not literally, but I do a lot of cooking
Well,
now.
I will say this: if In-N-Out Burger moves to Coeur d'Alene, that's a strong incentive.
That's what we're like every couple months we'll Google like how much closer are they to coming up? We can't quite figure it out if they're going to do it because the distribution centers, but they're in Boise and apparently
Boise.
that's In-N-Out's biggest hurdle every time they go to a new state is just getting in the state. So we're like, all right, you're here. Come on up. Oh, I'm frozen again. Come on, unfreeze camera. Let's go. I have one more question for you.
Yeah, that's all right.
Once it
I totally derailed it with these important questions about cuisine, but
No, you didn't. It's funny because I feel like if you're an Angelino, that is one of the things at the top of the list. It's like, because the food is so good there. It is really, other than the people that I love that are still living there, it is one of the top of the list things I miss about LA is the food.
well,
For
and
sure.
where I live right now in New York has some of the best Italian food in the world.
Oh,
Um, and and it's a very diverse area now. It wasn't like that as a kid, but like the church I go to has people from. We got so many people from the islands in the Caribbean, and
oh,
my friends are from like every culture, right?
amazing.
Which is another. It's a kind of a weird thing when people think I'm racist or whatever.
No,
But
I
anyway,
know. And I've picked up on all of this from, I think
yeah.
I've heard you mention this about your churches compared to some of the
Oh,
people that are critical of
right.
you who maybe go to like all white churches.
No, my some of my yeah. I mean, it's obviously like so cliche. You're never supposed to say my best friends are people that are not white or whatever. But
Yeah,
like
yeah. Uh-huh.
the truth is, I do go to like a very very diverse church culturally. Even having Spanish translation and stuff like that. I mean, we have just an incredible group of people from many different places. But what I was going to say is though that brings a cuisine with it, right? So like
Totally, yes.
I can get barbecue's the only bad like barbecue and fried chicken are terrible here. Everything else is good.
That's so funny.
So I really got into smoking, and now I can make like barbecue that's just as good
Heck
as,
yeah.
if not better than any of the stuff I've tasted down south. So I'm like, I love it because you invite someone who doesn't know barbecue over, and they're like, "This is the most amazing thing I've ever had in my
You
life."
can really impress them.
Right, right.
That's funny. Yeah,
So,
that's oh man, I don't even know if I should go off onto that tangent. I'll just say it quickly. That's one of the things I did not know when I moved here. I had no, I mean, it just wasn't even on my radar that it is such a ethnically homogenous area. Like it is pretty much all white people. We had no idea before we got here. I was coming for the homeschool laws, some of the political statements and things that I had heard from the area, just the laws in general in the state, minus like apparently our birth laws are horrible on a side note. I'm like, am I gonna have to become a birth advocate, whatever, side note. And our taxes, like we have state tax, and it's annoying to see that like Washington doesn't. But side note, it was wild getting up here and then being like, oh, everybody's white. Like I'm not used to this,
Oh,
but it's, that's fine. It's kind of neutral, honestly. And that's what I've realized. Like, oh, this is not, it's not like it's a moral value to be like, you have to be in a diverse area or whatever. It's kind of just neutral. And we really like the area. I mean, I'm staring up at the most beautiful mountain outside of my house. It's so stunning. It was not an area that fell hard to all the COVID stuff, which it was like very important to us. Homeschooling laws, amazing. It's really great. The community is very freedom minded in general, and I've never really experienced it to like that degree. How many I have so many mom friends that are all just like medically freedom minded, school freedom minded. Like it is just so many Christians like all over the area. It's really amazing.
well,
So,
my wife and I did a weekend in the Sawtooths in the
okay.
in the winter, and the thing that I was impressed me was like people forget about Idaho. It's extremely stunning and beautiful, but if you go
Yeah.
to a national park, if you went to Yosemite, let's say you went to California,
Uh-huh.
I would just be like in line on trails. You know what I mean? Like there's so many
Yes.
people, and in Idaho, I felt like, wow, I've got this place to myself. I didn't see one person on either of
Yep.
our hikes. So anyway,
Yep. It's still very low, like not crazy populated. And people really do forget about it. It's really amazing. So on that note, I have one more question slash thought. This is something I've been thinking about lately. Okay. I can't say, how do I even word this? Every question I bring up, I'm like, how do I even word this? But I found, and I think you've maybe even been someone that's talked about this, maybe rewind like 5 years or so. It's ironic. You'd figure I'd go the other direction, but I haven't. And maybe that's because the state of the cultural decay or whatever. Basically, I feel like I've become a little more ecumenical, if that's the word we want to use, as time has gone on. I don't know if it's because the more I've dove down, if that's the way we want to put it, different theological wormholes, things become a little convoluted, a little confusing. Also, I know that Jesus didn't say like have faith like a child. That's not exactly what he said, but come to me like the little children. There's just a big part of me that feels like the culture war has become so blatant. It's like the LGBTQ stuff. I mean, everything we've talked about, right? Um, I have found myself much more willing, I don't know, to be like, okay, so you are a believer. And I know that there's so much nuance here. I've talked a little bit about, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I feel like there is a lot of nuance here. But I'm wondering, where has your, because I saw you're speaking at, I think it's called like the Trash World Convention or something like that. I don't know what it's called. I know you're speaking at that with Calvin Robertson. I just am kind of curious
right.
because I think I've seen you in the past talk about like Billy Graham became, and maybe there's a difference here, but I know Billy Graham became a lot more ecumenical as he got older, or even this divide, if that's what we want to call it. Come on, unfreeze camera. Let's go. You got this. Come on. You're almost done. You've got this. There we go. Um, or even like this, if we want to call it a divide, right, between maybe the Ogden boys and the Moscow guys or whatever, that there's, oh, crud. I got so distracted by the frozen camera. The thought just floated away like a balloon. Uh, oh, man,
Cool.
come back, ecumenical. It's right there. I mean, I guess the thought's gone, so I'll just land it on the basic thought then. What are your thoughts around just this whole idea of like, I don't know, taking arms with hand in hand with people who claim to follow Christ? They may have different theology than you. Like, I don't know. How do you feel about that? I don't even know. The question's so vague. I just notice I've become more like, okay, well, you've said some basic things about your faith, and it may be more detailed than that, but like, I'm not going to turn away from you. We are kind of on the same page. I don't know, in regards to this culture war. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I think that in I think it's Second Corinthians it says what fellowship is light with darkness, and
Hmm.
I think that the main thing I want to make sure that, and this is before 2020, I've always thought this. The main
Hmm.
thing I want to make sure that I do is not give the impression that someone is a child of God or born again when they're not.
Hmm.
I don't think that I do that when I'm co-belligerent with someone else. So co-belligerency means You
I
know,
was
like
just going to ask what that meant.
we were co-belligerents with the Soviet Union when we were trying to defeat the Nazis, right? Does that mean
Okay,
that
yeah.
we were communists? I mean, maybe some people would say, but we no,
Uh,
like we didn't agree with communism. We were just co-belligerents. So we had a
mm,
common enemy. We worked together to defeat that enemy, and we had some serious disagreements between the Soviet Union and ourselves. And I think that co-belligerency is perfectly fine on issues like abortion or how do we
mm.
stop them from transing the kids and you know uh, gun rights, some things we've talked about. I think there's obviously there's really good historians who aren't Christians, and I'm going to read from them. I have no problem sharing a stage with them. The
Mm.
question becomes like, what is the pretext for sharing the stage? So there was a conference not long ago that was Glenn Beck was at, and it was promoted as a Christian men's conference and where you would be equipped to be a better Christian, essentially.
Oh, interesting.
And so Glenn Beck was speaking, and to me, that's a problem. Like if you're promoting him as an example of a Christian man, he's
Yeah,
Mormon.
yeah.
That's different. So it's totally fine if you wanted to do a cultural thing, depending on what that is, and bring Glenn Beck in and say he's going to oppose abortion with us. Like, good,
Mm,
great. We need
mm.
all the hands on deck that we can get. But I think that you don't want to give the impression that someone's saved when they're not. And so I want to be guarded about my theology in that way.
Mm.
I think that what's happening now is that people are starting to uh, rally around different principles because of the threats that we are facing. We have
Yeah.
different set of threats, or at least perceived threats now than we did before 2020. Before
Mm,
2020, it made more sense to divide over an issue like baptism or Calvinism. And now,
mm.
after post 2020, it's those issues don't seem that big when compared to whether or not men can be women or whether um, we should have masks and not meet for church. And
Yeah, yeah.
those issues became much more important. And so I think that where I've traveled, I've seen this. There are Presbyterians and Baptists meeting in the same church because the Presbyterian or the Baptist church was compromised. And so the ones who didn't want to be compromised on those issues left, and they are fine going to the Baptist church or vice
Mm,
versa. Because these very fundamental, important issues are now the things that unite us more so than denominational distinctions.
mm. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting next few years because there's part of me that's wondered if, like, I don't know. I don't, are we going to link arms with people to fight a fight and then just turn at each other and start fighting again or over these theological issues? But I guess what you said is probably true. You would know better than me because I wasn't so in the space that those probably were the things they were fighting about before 2020. And obviously this goes back really far to, the Reformation and all of that, but it does just feel like these cultural issues are kind of the utmost importance right now.
Yeah, I think that some of the things that you're seeing, the intramural fights, also have to do with, and I, I mean, I don't know if I want you to press me on like putting a finer point on this, but I do sincerely believe there's just a lack of maturity with many of our leaders, which I would
Mm,
expect. And this is, let me just say it this way: we have a managerial class that is primarily compromised, and they're loyal to each other,
mm,
and we rejected that, which was why you don't even trust elections. We don't trust the medical establishment. We don't trust anyone, right? So when we're looking, we're going to have leaders. We can't avoid that. So when we're looking for leaders, we're trying to find people we can trust. But these people haven't gone through the typical or traditional, uh, you know, schools, things you're supposed to do before you become a leader. They're outside of the system, right? So they're not
mm,
going through the system. There are some things in the system that have at least traditionally been good. Like there should have been, I don't know if that's still around, but there should have been, and at one time there was a sense of respect and camaraderie, and like you didn't reach a certain social status without understanding protocol in those,
mm,
right? And that means knowing how to talk to people. Like go watch Pride and Prejudice and see how
mm-hmm.
people talk to each other. They could literally insult you, and it sounds so nice.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah.
like, so we've lost that art in
Yeah,
many ways.
yeah.
And because I think we don't trust the elites, we're trying to grow a new pair of elites, but the new elites, they don't have all of that. And the way that they're sometimes becoming leaders is through online mediums.
I was just going to say that through social media.
yeah, where what's rewarded sometimes is the most extreme thing you can say that garners the most amount of controversy.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it naturally is going to favor people who are, I think, less calm, cool, and collected.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say, not to like end this call with giving you a big head, I whatever. But this is something else that I've really appreciated about you over the years is that you will give your thoughts and criticisms around a topic or a person. But I've never felt like there is this rampant disrespect for boomers that just, yeah,
Yeah.
just runs crazy. And I'm like, okay, not that some of you guys don't have some points here about maybe some general generational issues or sins or whatever. But like my parents are boomers, and a lot of the criticism that gets thrown out, I'm like, that's not them. My parents are very generous. They're very open to change. They're very open to thinking that they might have been wrong about a topic. Like it just doesn't align with the slanderous things I see online towards boomers. And so that's something that, yeah, like I said, on a maybe closing end note that I appreciate about you, that you give criticism in a way that's more Pride and Prejudice, in my opinion. And I'm
Oh,
sure someone would disagree with me and say you're the worst. I've learned that through
oh
internet
yeah.
culture. But from my perspective, you can take that compliment. I think you do a great job at nicely bringing criticism in a respectful way. And I think it's important because I do think there is something like, yes, older people could maybe get stuck in their ways or maybe not be willing to change as much, but there is so something there about your elders having experience. And I think some people are too quick to say that they're just, oh, they're just jealous or they're shut down to change versus like, okay, maybe, but maybe we should also listen. Maybe there's something to this as well, because I don't know about everyone else, but for me, the more I live, the more experiences I have, the more I'm like, whoa, maybe I wasn't 100% wrong, but like there's some stuff you just have to live. And then you're like, okay, didn't
Yep.
really, like being a mom. I say this to my sister all the time. I'm like, when people used to say, you'll see when you have, a child, I kind of took it as like an insult, a little bit like degrading, like you just can't know. And now I realize like, oh, that wasn't insulting. It was literally like, no, you literally can't know till you do this. Like, it's just, you're like a transformer. You go through this transformation and then it's like, boom, life is different. So yeah, I appreciate that about you. And all of that makes sense. And this was just such an awesome conversation, John. I feel like I could easily just keep picking your brain for hours. And I thank you for taking the time to just sit and chat with me. And this was really great.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nikki. I enjoyed it. And, keep in touch. And if there's anything else I can do, let me know.
Definitely. We will definitely connect again. I'm going to like stop the recording and then I'll say bye. But yeah, thank you.